All right, there we go. That's better. North Carolina Reads is the North Carolina Humanities statewide book club for 2022. North Carolina Reads features 5 books that explore issues of racial, social, and gender equality and the history and culture of North Carolina. Any views, findings, conclusions, opinions, or recommendations expressed do not necessarily represent those of North Carolina Humanities or the National Endowment for the Humanities. North Carolina Reads is made possible in part by a More Perfect Union, a special initiative grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. This is a program of the North Carolina Center for the Book. The 5 selected books feature stories of American perseverance and diversity. The people, places, and events in the books are also pose critical questions about how North Carolinians view their role in helping to form a more just and inclusive society. North Carolina Humanities hopes these stories encourage engaging, productive conversation among participants. At the heart of North Carolina Reads is North Carolina Humanities' desire to connect communities through shared reading experiences. Reading is important because it helps us develop our critical thinking skills, strengthens our minds, vocabulary, and mental health, and creates opportunities for us to empathize with others' stories and experiences. June's book has been Driving with the Devil, Southern Moonshine, Detroit Wheels, and the Birth of NASCAR by Neil Thompson. Tonight's platform is both in person and via Zoom. For those attending online, please type any questions or comments into the chat box or raise your hand, and I will be able to allow you to chime in and ask questions or comments when it's appropriate. Joining us this evening is Oliver Ernie, co-owner of End of Days Distillery here in Wilmington, to help talk about the history of distilling in North Carolina. And with that, we're going to pause for just a second while I adjust some of the technology and we can welcome Oliver. Right.
Yep.
Good to go.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the New Hanover County Library for hosting this event. We're so appreciative of being included in a bit of North Carolina's history. It's an amazing thing to produce something new and creative that we can celebrate with the community here in Wilmington and with North Carolina as a whole. I'm excited to talk to you all about the history and the culture behind creating spirits here in Eastern North Carolina. I'm also going to talk to you a bit about some of the challenges and some of the rewards that we've experienced while opening one of the first distilleries that's been here in the port city since prior to Prohibition. End of Days Distillery opened February 1st of 2020. And I'm going to give you a little bit of my background and association with End of Days. My great friend Shane and Beth Faulkner are the primary founders of the distillery. Shane is one of the most enterprising people that I've ever met. He has a background in agriculture that's similar to mine. His parents were farmers. My dad was a dairy farmer. Shane grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina too, but I grew up visiting my family's farm in Wisconsin. The agricultural community and the distillation community really go hand in hand. So we grew up with a love of farming, of using your hands to grow things, and of working hard to make a living for one another. This is my family's 40th year in Wilmington, North Carolina, so I'm excited to be here. This is actually, I think, the week my family moved here 40 years ago. And it's been amazing to see the growth in Wilmington, to see a community that celebrates entrepreneurial endeavors, and to be able to be part of an entrepreneurial startup story along with great friends. We get to celebrate a bit of North Carolina history because we're in the liquor business, and there's nothing that gets people talking about history like having a good drink. And so I'm excited. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the history of distillation in North Carolina. And we'll talk a bit about North Carolina as a whole, the moonshining industry too. So making liquor began early in North Carolina's history. In the mid-1800s, lawmakers took a stand against what they called wicked whiskey. In 1902, the growing influence of the Anti-Saloon League led to the passage of the Watts Act, which basically banned the production and sale of liquor outside of incorporated towns. So basically, it outlawed rural distilleries. In 1905, the Ward Law went further, and it banned sales in 68 out of 98 counties in North Carolina. Then it gets even worse. In 1908, North Carolina became the first state in the South to ban alcohol. This was well before Prohibition was enacted. Then, of course, in 1919, the 18th Amendment made producing, selling, and transporting liquor a crime. So hence the moonshine industry was born. And it lasted even until the 21st Amendment ended Prohibition in 1933. So moonshine. Moonshine by any name, what is the definition of moonshine? Basically, it has its own vocabulary. It is essentially illegal, untaxed whiskey. And do you know how it got its name? It was because it was distilled by the moonlight, without the government's eyes watching. And it's been part of North Carolina lore and culture for centuries, dating even back to the colonies. Moonshining really does have its own vocabulary. A bootlegger was technically the seller of illegal alcohol. The moonshiner is the producer. And those who transported the product were called runners or blockaders. And oftentimes these duties would overlap. You would have moonshiners producing and running their own products. And then of course, I like this one. I'm a former accountant and I am a practicing CPA still. The cops, they were called the revenuers. They were hunting for that revenue. So despite the ban on the production and sale of liquor, there was a great deal of demand for it still. And moonshiners did their best to meet that demand consistently. So before Prohibition became law, bootleggers regularly, they traveled, they had routes just like the milkmen. They would go door to door and actually deliver whiskey in saddlebags and in hot water bottles. And so they had a route of delivering the moonshine. And of course, moonshining, they wouldn't do that if this wasn't the case. Moonshining was a highly profitable industry. If a bootlegger rounded a curve and spotted a revenuer roadblock, they would often ditch their car, jump out of it while it was still moving, letting the revenuer chase behind and leaving their load and the illegal cargo behind. So moonshiners, it was so profitable, they could lose every third car and shipment of their moonshine, and they could still turn a profit. And so they would just leave their cars behind and keep on going, selling the moonshine. And of course, account books from various Western North Carolina and neighboring states show that a bushel of corn and a gallon of whiskey sold for approximately the same amount throughout the late 18th century and early 19th centuries. So in 1850, for example, in Alexander County, a farmer could sell 25 bushels of corn for $10. Converted that into whiskey, those bushels could sell for $25. And 100 years ago, North Carolina had more distilleries than any other state in the nation, just over 100 years ago now, 110 roughly, I guess. And then all of a sudden, it all went away when Prohibition was enacted in North Carolina. Then, 4 years after the 21st Amendment was passed, which ended Prohibition, North Carolina set up the ABC, or the Alcohol Beverage Control System. This was back in 1937. And only then was the 21st Amendment formally recognized in the state of North Carolina. And then shortly after the end of Prohibition, breweries and wineries were allowed to operate in North Carolina, but lawmakers didn't actually lift the ban on distilling spirits in North Carolina until 1979. In 1938, the National Alcohol Beverage Control Association was founded to represent the state-controlled system under which state governments took over the wholesale and retail operations of selling heavier alcohol-proof beverages in stores. Today, North Carolina is one of 17 states that employ this system. And basically, the North Carolina Alcohol Beverage Control System operates under the Department of Public Safety. And its overall objective is to provide more uniform control over the sale, purchase, transportation, manufacturing, consumption, and possession of alcoholic beverages in a state. And today, just some little facts. The commission has 171 boards with over 430, 420 different ABC locations where you can purchase alcoholic beverages. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the challenges of navigating the ABC system a little bit later. But first, let's talk about why myself and my friends decided to open a distillery in North Carolina after all that wild history I just explained to you. So my good friend Shane and his wife Beth, they used to host me when I was in college. We called it weekly family soup night. I would go over to their house and really bum soup off of them. But actually, both Shane and myself, we enjoy cooking, and we'd share recipes back and forth. Shane would talk about, he was running a small business then, but loved creating things with his hands, loved figuring out processes. So he advanced his knowledge of soup making into brewing beer at home. Became a fantastic home brewer and really started entering competitions for his beer, was making fantastic home brew back before the craft brewery business really hit in North Carolina. And I was going to school to be a CPA. I already had a job in public accounting, but we would sit around his fire pit, sip on some of his fantastic home brew, talk about the idea of opening a brewery here in Wilmington. I thought it sounded like a really fun thing to do. And it could have even been a very profitable thing to do back then. The problem was Shane had a young family, not really time for him to get started on that. He's operating a business. I was just getting started in my career, not really time to do that. But this idea sort of lingered, and Shane and I would talk about it over the past many years. When could we make it happen? How could we make it happen? And then our tastes sort of changed. I started learning about how to make craft cocktails by going to accounting conferences all over the country. I would find myself a little younger than the rest of the crew and perhaps go want to learn from a local mixologist in a different city where they had access to different spirits about some of the things they were creating behind the craft cocktail bars. I'd then take those drinks back home and make them for my friends, including Shane and Beth. And it was a lot of fun to create new things, to demo new recipes, to try new things. Shane started enjoying collecting scotch, collecting bourbon. We would enjoy touring distilleries together. And the concept was born of opening a distillery here in Wilmington. Shane toured the Kentucky Bourbon Trail and really thought it was like Disney World for adults. A lot of fun, something that could be brought to Wilmington. And essentially, we were ready to open February 1st of 2020. So why a distillery? I mean, just look at it. It's kind of beautiful. It's an advanced form. It's cooking meets science is the way that I like to think about it. Distillation to yield consistent batches. There's a lot of science that's involved. It's technique, it's love, it's passion. It is creative, it's agricultural. We have farmers that support our business. We have wonderful local providers that support our business. We even have retired people that want to come in and help us bottle because having a drink together brings people together. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges of building a distillery. It's a little different to have a dream than to build your dream. And one of the major challenges of building a distillery is navigating and understanding the different forms of laws and regulations that are really more on a federal level, but then also North Carolina has its own set of laws that have to be navigated. Dealing with local authorities could be difficult. Even here in New Hanover County, opening a distillery that had a craft cocktail bar and navigating city permitting and things like that created challenges to opening the distillery. Also, according to law, you have to have in place a lease for your distillery. So you have to already have your lease in place. You have to be under construction on the building. You have to be supplying and actively building your still and other equipment, although it's illegal to possess a still until you are a distillery. So there's strange workarounds that have to happen in order to get you up and running as a distillery. They want to know everything about you, background checks. Basically, you have to even report who has keys to the distillery. You have to give them diagrams. Every proof gallon that we distill is reported. And it's a bit of a, can be a bit of a challenge to navigate those circumstances. So building a distillery, definitely a challenge. What was great is back in 2019, Shane landed on a really cool building. And it took some vision to turn this Quonset hut building into what it is today. I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what it looked like before, some of the history of what this building, some of the images that Shane captured back when he first took this over. And thankfully, he had a good friend who owned the building that he was able to negotiate a lease with him. And he had the vision really to turn this into an awesome half-barrel looking distillery here in Wilmington that also celebrates the history of the building behind it. So here's a few pictures pre-construction. When Shane took this over, it was a cabinet and furniture manufacturing center. They did furniture repair and cabinet manufacturing in the structure. There was a lot of sawdust, a lot of things to be cleaned out. If those of you on Zoom have not seen it before in person, I invite you to come tour, and it looks very different from what you see stored here today. We'll share a few pictures at the end. Some of this structure remains. This is actually the front view of the distillery. Some of the walls that are in place are the only walls really that are still in place within the distillery structure. And of course, lots of sawdust. That's a picture of Shane. Thankfully, wearing a mask pre-pandemic just to protect against sawdust in this space and all the cleanup work that had to be done in bringing the vision to reality and opening the space. The cleanup work underway, cleaned up the floors, really gutted the building and rebuilt it, cleaned everything within it. And a lot of carpentry work went into it, a lot of obviously structural work had to go in, HVAC, insulation, many of those things. And then here's some reconstruction effort taking place as we move through. One of the themes of our neighborhood is it's called the cargo district. So we knew shipping containers needed to be incorporated in the construction and design. If you visit the distillery today, you'll see this particular shipping container, perhaps in the hallway or possibly housing our 2 million BTU steam boiler that heats up our equipment. It's a lot of work to open up a shipping container and use it in the construction and design. This is a picture of Shane actually welding a piece of it together, trying to take a piece off just to get the footing in place to properly level the shipping container in there. Getting it all set took forklifts, took lots and lots of grit and determination and hard work and pushing through while owning a building and leasing a building basically before the business is even up and running. Took a lot of hard work to get it there. Ah, there's the actual welding work taking place as we go. You can see us cutting the opening. Some of these window cutouts actually became the face of the craft cocktail bar that's there as well. It took much longer than this in real time, trust me. So lots of work to open up the space and turn it into the distillery that's there. This is a 1940s era Quonset hut building. Been there since that World War II period. We think it may have been a supply building during that time, but to take something old and make it new again, it's taken vision, it took determination, but it's a labor of love to see what it's become today. You can see the hallway to our distillation side taking form there, the window cutouts that make up our lab, window cutouts that make up the back of the distillery area and the back of our craft cocktail bar as well. Then, of course, this is the beautiful view from Tilly, that is our 500-gallon pot still that's now in place. The view out from the distillation side into our craft cocktail lounge, which provides so much entertainment and joy. Currently, we have live music and a food truck going on there right now. And then, of course, this space made really resplendent for a good friend's wedding. They added in these beautiful flowers and floral features, but in general, Shane's wife, Beth, has an amazing eye for detail and picked out the furnishings and had the forethought to bring in live plants and other details that really make the space shine and make it so special. Of course, the view to our mercantile room. We do sell merchandise and other things within that, but also, if you remember from those early pictures, those walls were the only ones that were still remaining after everything was taken down. The nighttime fun going on currently right now, a little twilight celebration with that front glass garage door open. We have a lot of individuals who come out and enjoy the beautiful patio in the evening. And it's awesome to see a structure that's been here for 80+ years gain new life and be celebrated as part of the Wilmington community now. Our view back to the neighborhood there on Castle Street, currently you would see a food truck parked right in that spot. And then, of course, this is Shane and Beth Faulkner, my dear friends who brought this dream to reality. They took this vision and have made it what it is today, and really added their touch, their detail, their refinement. And honestly, they've built a team that we all support each other. We're really a family that runs and operates this business today. So what is behind the name? It's a question we get asked a lot. End of Days Distillery. Now, pandemic era. It may have had one meaning to a particular group of people. It's the end of days. What we like to say, though, is at the end of the day, celebrate the day. That it's about the moments you live with the ones you love. It's about celebrating, building something together. It's about what you're going to do in the next day and talking about that at the end of a day spent around a fire or doing the things that you love with one another, or just coming down from a difficult day with the person that you care about the most. So for us, it really is a positive statement. It's about living well together at the end of the day and enjoying a nice quality beverage together as well. So we'll talk a little bit about the team. Building a team is an important part of creating any new business. And Shane brought together an awesome team. We've been really family together. We've talked over many hours of us being in different businesses. And so I'm excited to be part of that team. I'm in front of you, so you won't see my picture up here. I don't think, maybe I'm in here, I don't know. But basically, it's a wonderful team that is also family. Beth, of course, is Shane's right-hand woman. She really is the heart of the business and has an incredible both eye for detail and for organization that keeps us functioning and keeps the business going constantly. She pushes forth information and is just a brilliant, brilliant mind behind the business in her own right. My good friend Cameron. Cameron moved to Wilmington, went to UNCW. He's a little younger than me. He ended up being my college roommate. And so he became a CPA and was a partner with me in my CPA firm here in Wilmington as well. And I'm excited that although I am a CPA, he gets to do all the QuickBooks work behind the scenes. I look into it. I'm there too, but he gets to do a lot of that work. And he also is a brilliant tax researcher, so he applied some of that knowledge to navigating the federal permitting system, and he keeps us on track as far as our ABC reporting requirements and make sure that although we talk about the moonshine industry, we are all very legally minded people, and we want to pay our taxes and make sure we're supporting our community in the right way. Oh yeah, I'm up there. So my title on here is CRO. Really, that just means that I enjoy making cocktails and beverages for people that hopefully will eventually produce revenue. and other things that I do as part of that. We also, in the western part of the state, not many of you will get to meet Rhonda because she does live in Durham, but she's been a driving force behind the business and is a business mind in her own right. She helped found a very successful business on her own and ran multiple locations of that before joining our team, and has really driven the sales team forward. She manages the sales team for us and is able to present sort of our product to the western part of the state more effectively. Oh, Evan. Evan is the 2-year-old that I talked about that is now our marketing director. He's Shane's son, brilliant kid, going to school for graphic design and helps on the social media and marketing front a great deal. And then just about a year and a half ago, Zach joined us from Colorado. He is our assistant distiller, warehouse manager, so you'll see him there working as well. And we have to talk about our front of house team. Gus has been with us since prior to the grand opening. He is a creative mixologist on his own, but really the entire team of mixologists, Brittany, Marina, all of us work together to create new cocktails, to dream up new things, present new images, really plan out new activities at the distillery. And we've got a great team, a dynamic team that keeps us going. And then our sales team as well. They're out there day to day talking to those ABC store reps. They navigate the system, the ABC system, more frequently and more readily than any of the rest of us. They deal with the challenges of working with employees who may not love their job or the product that you're trying to sell quite as much as you do. But they do it diligently, they do it with smiles, they do it with relationship building, and they're an incredible team that gets the job done. We are in somewhere around 95% of all ABC stores in the state now. And so we've spread out throughout the state with an incredible team of people that occasionally likes to get together for a little cocktail. I think this more than likely was actually one of our bourbon releases where we were all together for a nice bourbon release during that time. So we can't talk about this without talking about the grand opening. The grand opening was a wild ride. Anytime you're building up to start a business, there's an incredible amount of work involved. All of us came together as a team months before to try to plan what would become the grand opening celebration. This was my first debut craft cocktail menu. Also included the first debut spirits. We were there until about 3 in the morning, the day before the grand opening, just labeling products. The history of small business is filled with printing errors, and ours included a little history that we did not receive our final label until 4 o'clock the Thursday before our grand opening that Saturday. So all of us were there just working to get it done, bottling, and we could not anticipate the wonderful support we received from the community. It was amazing to see the turnout. We had the mayor there. We had an incredible group of people that came out. We estimate, based on our camera and the fact that the room did not stop looking like this the entire day, somewhere around 2,500 people came out for a grand opening. And it was an incredible day. I did not move from a 3-foot area for the entirety of it because I was actually functioning as a professional bartender for the first time in my life. So, but we all got it done. We had a team that came together that day, and it was an amazing part of our journey just to get that done. Here's some drone footage from that day as well. You can see the craft cocktail line kind of going down the street with oysters, but a great time being had by all. Then, of course, 6 weeks later, global pandemic, March 2020. I believe it was around March 17th of 2020. Also the first day that our spirits went into ABC distribution. Quite a challenge navigating a full shutdown, a quarantine really, not being able to present our product to North Carolina ABC or any of the bars and restaurants that we had anticipated. But thankfully, we used our grit and determination late in February to figure out that we could produce lots of hand sanitizer. And that really became part of our story. We manufactured and produced a great deal of hand sanitizer that went out throughout the community. Felt really good to give back to the public. It got our name out there. And it honestly has just become part of our story that we did that. Never really thought opening a distillery here in Eastern North Carolina or being involved in any small business, I would see the name of the business mentioned in Forbes magazine just 2 months after it opened. But getting out there, doing the hand sanitizer, got our name into that international publication as one of the distilleries in the world that was making a difference. And it felt really good during that time to get back. We had people that had literal tears because they were so afraid that they couldn't go out in public without hand sanitizer. So it's become part of our story. And also, thankfully, we had businesses that supported us and purchased the hand sanitizer from us that kept our door open. Our branding expert, we've got a wonderful North Carolina-based branding expert who did pro bono work, came up with some really fun sayings during a difficult time that just added a touch of humor to the fact that we are a distillery producing hand sanitizer. You'll see that's one of my favorites. Hello, I'm hand sanitizer, Chuck Norris in a bottle. Helping you slay all day, helping you come clean, spread love, not germs. I've got you COVID, go ahead, rub it in. Happy hour for your hands, that's a pretty good one, that's fitting. Killer kill. So let's talk about our products for a minute. I talked about hand sanitizer. I would much rather talk about the good tasting stuff. So I'll take you through our series of products. We have our Port of Entry series. It celebrates our hometown. Wilmington is the port city. It is a successful port. It was, Wilmington was one of the largest exporters of spirits, both by rail and by sea prior to Prohibition era. So we want to celebrate that port city look. And our first 3 series of products do that. We have a award-winning premium vodka, 7 times distilled, premium corn-based. It's won a number of awards. And more than that, we just get people that have fallen in love with it because of its crisp, clean taste. Arjen is one of my favorites. Developing its recipe was a lot of fun. It's a blend of wonderful botanicals that has a unique profile. It's not overly punchy with juniper. It's an approachable gin. It's one that we urge people that have not tried gin for a while to sample because it was designed not to make you feel like you've been hit in the face with a juniper branch, basically. It's approachable, it's sippable, it's refreshing. It's got some of those summer citrus flavors, but then it has a nice complementary spice note that goes hand in hand with it. Our rum is unique. It's got a wonderful sugarcane blackstrap molasses flavor, adds a bit of butterscotch in tasting notes. It also has won multiple awards. Not going to take you through all those because I'd rather you just taste it and like it for yourself. But having other judges outside of the state name it to a top list makes us feel pretty successful and accomplished. And it shows that it's gaining acclaim throughout the country. We have our Castaway series, which all of our labels tell a little bit of a story. For this series, I like to say that these barrels got lost at sea for a little while and our rum diver retrieved them. So we have a barrel aged rum. For this one, we took two-year-old barrels of rum. This was our 2-year anniversary release and added those to a specially aging wood barrel that's called a squirrel that allows us to use multiple woods to finish the spirit. That allows us to achieve unique and interesting flavor notes that are unlike any rum that's currently on the market. This is a limited release. We typically will have this at the distillery or it can be requested throughout North Carolina at ABC store locations. Then we have our Castaway Barrel Rested Rum. Just 6 months in a new American oak barrel leads to a nice oaky and smoky finish with that same butterscotch profile. Lends itself well to cocktails or it can be sipped on its own. I call it our gateway to bourbon because it is sippable on its own. It pairs nicely in other cocktails where you might think about using bourbon. One of those is a barrel rested rum Manhattan. Really fantastic Manhattan using rum. Then our barrel rested gin. Of course, our gin barrels got rescued by the siren of the sea. We're here at the coast. She gathered some of the botanicals on the way up. And by barrel resting the gin, you mellow that botanical profile and you add some more rich characteristics that come from the barrel over time. It also gives it that nice, rich golden color. You can use this instead of actually barrel aging a cocktail. Then, of course, our Survivor's Cut series. Survivor's Cut, the name Survivor's Cut comes both from our endurance during the pandemic and from a little bit of whiskey lore. If you know anything about aging a spirit, there's particular terminology that surrounds barrel aging a spirit. The old moonshiners didn't know much about evaporation. So there's a portion of the barrel, the spirit within the barrel, that gets lost to the atmosphere over time. They called that the angel share. They said the angels came down and took it out of there. Then there's a portion of the spirit that gets lost to the wood of the barrel. They call that the devil's cut. And so we said, basically, after everything we went through, and all of us went through in the pandemic, let the angels and the devil take whatever they will. What's left is for the survivors. That's the good portion. That's what all the rest of us are going to enjoy. So our first series of bourbon was released last October, and it was released to really acclaim. People were trying to find those bottles. It was the first bourbon that's been released in Wilmington, North Carolina since prior to Prohibition in 1908. And so it was historic. And we also had very limited qualities of that. So Survivor's Cup bourbon, it released right around the end of September. And I was not prepared to see what I saw in our parking lot not far after that. The first day it was released at 7 o'clock in the morning, I will tell you, I checked our video camera. We already had 5 people in line at the front door. By the time I came in at 9 o'clock, there were over 25 people in line. By 10:30, this was the scene. So we had an incredible turnout. We had well over 100, 150 people that came out to try to get their hands on the first bottles of Survivor's Cut. They waited in line for some over 3 hours. Many of them received bottles. Some of them I had been informed, you look like the 75th person. We have 75 bottles. I'm so sorry, please come back. It was not a fun responsibility, but they were very happy and very, very glad to be there and be part of history. So whenever we do a bourbon release, we're gonna always make it an event. And it's a lot of fun to do that. Our next bourbon release, by the way, for those of you that are on here, is scheduled to be the end of September, sometime in October. So keep an eye out on our website. Take a look for that. We have not formally announced that that's when it will be because we have to taste from those barrels. But as soon as we are assured that those barrels are ready, we'll let you know. Ready to drink cocktails. These are a passion project of mine. These are kind of like the combination of my accounting background, my culinary new background coming together. I never thought I would have a spreadsheet for scaling cocktail recipes, but that's what we've created because people were so enthusiastic about having a ready to drink cocktail they could just take home. We've released 3 of them now. These just went into ABC distribution at the beginning of June. We have the mule that's based using our vodka, that's a traditional ginger mule. We have the gin and tonic using the gin and a house-made tonic syrup. And then the hurricane, that's a nice coastal sipping classic with our rum, passion fruit, and citrus flavors that come through. All of these make up our full series, and we had to highlight them there on the coast. That's my home beach right there, Wrightsville Beach. Had to show it off a little bit. So awards have been won, cocktails have been created, beautiful cocktails have been made, beautiful pictures have been made, and we've all had a great time bringing it together. This is probably a picture. If you haven't seen it, we have a startup documentary series on PBS. This is one of the scenes from that show. You can learn more about our history and watch a full documentary on the startup experience of opening into Days Distillery, hear from Shane, Beth, myself, and see some of our operations in progress. That's free on Amazon Prime and through PBS streaming. We have so much fun doing photo shoots. I get to go to the beach and just throw bottles around. I hope I don't get caught by the Coast Guard, but it's beautiful imagery that we can bring together. We have a barrel program we've created. I urge any members or anyone that comes and visits the distillery to take a look at the cask collection. You can be part of barrel aging a spirit. You get your name on a whiskey barrel. Who doesn't want that? So definitely check that out through our website. We actually burn the serial number. You get a barrel coin. You put a deposit on the barrel, but then you'll get the future rights to the spirit that comes out of it. There's plenty more information on that on the website. So please take a look at that when you get the chance. A couple highlights from the past years. Shane and one of his favorite t-shirts, Booze Pays the Bills. We're working on that coming true as much as we can. We're hustling every day, working hard to make it happen, making new things and creating jobs here in Eastern North Carolina. It's amazing to hang out, to see other culinary ventures come forth. We've done pop-up dinners. We will continue to do pop-up dinners with local culinary artists like Chef Bobby from True Blue, did a wonderful Spanish themed event. We've done events with Floriana, done events with Pine Valley Market. We have food trucks every evening that come out and show off their fare. And then of course we get to do it while looking at beautiful labels that were crafted right here on the coast, all while making bourbon and occasionally with me serving some cocktails. This was a fun event over at Brooklyn Arts Center, another historic building that I urge you to go and check out. We've done barrel filling events. Like we mentioned, we film things there all the time. So you might come in one day, you'll see us doing a photo shoot or filming, and we urge you to be part of the action if you come in for that as well. Oysters are part of our tradition. Barrel dumps. You can go on our Instagram and watch us dump barrels, which is apparently a thing. But it's a lot of fun actually once it happens. We get to taste and see what's coming out of a barrel at first. We have our cask collection parties. Look for those the end of September. We have a gin release that's coming up very soon. It's called Luna Bloom. I never thought I would work for an organization that has a professional ice guy, but we do. We have an ice guy that makes our beautiful clear ice that's part of the distillery. He's made some wonderful sculptures. This was a team up with Eagle Point at their member guest event where he did some awesome ice sculpture work for us. We've gotten to do some fun focus on the coast photo shoots. Really though, we've gotten to make a lot of cocktails and that's been a ton of fun. That's a side passion of mine. It's a side passion that led me to meet somebody I'm a big fan of. This is Chef Robert Irvine. He's a pretty cool dude. The cocktail I served him was a little too sweet. And I can't do his voice, but that's what he said. Team ups with culinary food. You can use gin and food too. But gin botanicals have a wonderful profile. Just earlier today, we were distilling a batch of gin yesterday. We had a local chef who's competing in a culinary competition who's going to use our gin botanicals to make a delicious North Carolina trout. So we have a ton of fun bringing all these things forward. We continue to make new things, to create new things. It's not without challenges. North Carolina ADC system can be a little difficult, but we're navigating that. We're learning how to do it. We're doing it by creating relationships. And that's really the key is if you come visit the distillery, you'll see that we are there and all of our staff, they're friendly people who are eager to talk to you about what comes next, about our new products we have coming out. I'll tell you our next release, you'll get the early preview of this. We have a butterfly pea flower gin. It's called Luna Bloom. It's infused with butterfly pea flower, which makes this beautiful lavender blue hue and adds a little bit more of a floral essence there at the end. And so we have a ton of fun bringing all this forward. So I'd like to open it up if anybody has questions. I think it'd be good to open it up now. Do we have any questions on the screen?
Sure. So first of all, yes. So we did have a comment early on from Norma. She said that gin always tastes like pine salt to her. So which I've heard numerous times, but on the tour yesterday and today, you've talked a bunch about how you flavor your gin and how it's different than kind of your standard gin flavors.
So I've heard that before from many people. Juniper berries have a very distinct profile, and it is in the juniper tree is in the pine family. So you may pick up on some of those flavors. We didn't want ours to be overly punchy with that juniper pine sol note. And some Distilleries that use lower quality or juniper that's not as fresh, you'll get that pine sol note to it. We actually order our botanicals and try to distill within days of them coming in, so they're as fresh as possible. And that makes a big difference in the flavor profile of what we bring forward. So if you are a person that can only taste pine sol, I urge you to give it another sip, maybe with a different viewpoint, and see if it opens your eyes to something new, or try it mixed. Go see your professional mixologist and tell them you don't know how to use gin, and let them craft something for you with flavors that you enjoy.
And then one other comment, when I lived in the little Gin Street neighborhood in Durham in 1975, members of a bootlegging family still lived in a building that had their grandfather's speakeasy. Though the speakeasy was gone, some relatives were still in the business. So that's a cool little connection there.
That's very cool. I think what's awesome about getting into this industry has been hearing the moonshiner stories. And there are stories, I have a great friend, a mentor of mine who was in the beer industry for years. And he shared with me that his family owned in the late 1800s, the first spirit company that would ship direct to consumer. And then of course it was killed by Prohibition. But it's amazing to hear all these stories. We love hearing these stories when you come visit the distillery, or if you want to share them with any of us. It's interesting, and it's a celebration of North Carolina culture to hear it. I've learned stories about my own family I did not know. Apparently, my great-grandfather had a still that he hid in the chicken coop on our dairy farm in Wisconsin. I had no idea that happened. And I told my uncle, wow, that's pretty enterprising. He said, you think it's enterprising that our granddad broke the law? And I said, no, I think it's enterprising that he figured out how to do something that couldn't be done before. And so don't encourage breaking the law, but encourage figuring out how to do something you may not have known how to do before.
Do you all have any questions? Okay, let's see. There is how often do you change up the cocktails that you serve?
We try to do it seasonally. We base a lot of the ingredients off what is seasonally available. So we'll do weekly or monthly drink specials that highlight a particular ingredient based on the season.
And then the same person who had the story from Durham. More recently, I met a neighbor where I live now who said back when North Carolina didn't have many roads, her ancestors had turned their corn crop into whiskey. Value added way to be able to get your crop into the market in a barrel in the back of a wagon.
That's North Carolina entrepreneurship at its finest.
Yes.
Very cool. Well, I thank you all very much for your time. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. You know, yesterday you said you had to get the BP flour gin approved. So do you have to, does each recipe have to go through an approval process, and where do you send it?
So the question was about the approval of particular recipes, and I mentioned that we're coming out with a butterfly pea flour gin, and it took a little bit of time for us to get that approved. It's federal approval that we seek. And so up until October of last year, the United States, the FDA, in conjunction with the TTB that actually regulates alcohol production, had not recognized butterfly pea flour as a gin additive. And so although other countries were producing and allowed to import their butterfly pea flour gins, we were not allowed to produce a butterfly pea flour gin until that regulation changed. So thankfully that came through, and we were ready to go. We had already done test batches and everything else. We were already in label development, design, and we're going to be one of the first butterfly pea flour gins to hit the market in the United States. But it's a regulatory process. Any one of our labels, any of our spirits, the botanical elements that get weighed out and put into it, the recipe has to be registered with that organization, the TTB. All of the alcohol that's produced at the distillery is also weighed out, measured, and taxed. And so it's a regulated environment that we function in. Very, very good question. Thank you very much.
Well, that is all for now. Do you have lots of thank yous and appreciation for coming here tonight?
I can't thank you guys enough for having us out here, for the library coming and doing a tour yesterday, for all of you taking time, either in person or on Zoom, to be here to hear a little bit about our story. I urge you, come see us in person, taste our spirits if you're in a different location. We really, really are so appreciative of the support that we receive here in North Carolina. And we're going to keep celebrating this culture and of entrepreneurship that is creating new spirits.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Anybody who is attending on Zoom or who registered will be receiving an email in the next hour or so with a very short 3-question survey about how I'm doing with programs. And if you have any recommendations or requests for programs in the future, please put those in there. Thank you so much for joining us. And we will have this recording up on the website, maybe not tomorrow, but by early next week. So thank you all so much for joining us tonight.